Good evening. To start this evening off on an auspicious note, may we request Mr. N. Wagul, Chairman of our jury, and the other jury members present here, Dr. Chavan, to light the ceremonial lamp. Could Indrajit Gupta, Seema Singh, please escort them to the dais. Could we also request Mr. Gurmeet Singh to accompany them?
Thank you, gentlemen. Chances are most people in this room know Forbes India for the India Rich List and more recently for our Leadership Awards. And yes, we're about celebrating entrepreneurial success and growth and all that good stuff. But from the start, we've spent a lot of time on what has come to be known as conscious capitalism. Financial success that does not come at the cost of society, that seeks to grow by helping those less fortunate to improve their lives as well. Today, we give that thought, those feelings, a concrete shape. Today, we will recognize the efforts of those who epitomize this spirit, individuals and organizations who have given generously not just money, but time, skill, and expertise to create and nurture models of enlightened philanthropy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever Forbes India Philanthropy Awards. Meetu?
Let's start by telling you a little bit about the evening ahead of you. You will notice today that the guest list is small. It is, and it is exclusive. Every one of you has been carefully chosen, not for your net worth or your seniority in your organization, but because we think that your commitment to philanthropy is both genuine and constructive, and because we believe that we can learn from you. You will also notice that the decor is simple, that there are no frills, there is no glitz. We were determined to keep it that way. You may say that this venue, the Leela Palace, is a luxury hotel, and that's true. But the reason we are here is because the Leela has generously agreed to be a venue sponsor as their gesture of support for what we are trying to do here. We have worked with the general manager of the Leela Palace, Mr. Andrew Hendrian, who's here with us. Thank you, Mr. Hendrian. With him and his staff, we planned a simple menu that's been designed to give you a genuine, wholesome taste of India. And as to the event itself, of course, we are here to applaud our winners. But instead of meaningless trophies, we've got these exquisite metalwork keepsakes depicting the movie tree, which is symbolic of the art of giving. And since we are here to exchange ideas, to learn from each other, our winners won't make thank you speeches, beg your pardon. Instead, we'll ask them to share a little of the learning from their philanthropic journeys. And we also have a couple of short panel discussions, or more accurately, chats with friends, to enhance the journey of learning we hope this evening will be. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to tell you more about the intent behind the creation of the Forbes India Philanthropy Awards, the only corporate awards where everybody wins, please join me in welcoming the editor of Forbes India, Indrajit Gupta.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a very special evening for all of us at Network 18. As the publishers of the Indian edition of Forbes, we were born against the backdrop of the financial crisis of 2008, at a time when capitalism had begun to earn a bad name. Trust in business corporations was declining, and social inequities was growing across the world. And as we began to sketch out our editorial agenda, we listened very carefully to many erudite voices from our own country, calling for a more humane, a more just society. In our conversations with them, they spoke about the opportunity before India to create a new, softer form of capitalism, which could become a role model for the rest of the world. Over the past 3.5 years, our entire team has committed to this powerful theme in many different ways. We've had the privilege of coming face to face with many incredible people across the country, people who are making change happen. And the vignettes of stories from the magazine, which have flashed before you on these two white screens, are a testimony to that. As more and more Indians step up to do their bit, we've tried to be on the ball, covering the best philanthropic efforts. And we've also put new relevant big ideas into the public domain. Ideas like the purpose of wealth, conscious capitalism, shared value, catalytic philanthropy, and of course business as a force for good. We've got some of the best thought leaders from around the world to share their perspective with our community of readers. Very often, the media is blamed for constantly portraying a picture of India as a country that seems to have lost its way. I admit that on occasion some of that criticism may be valid, but equally, there are also many good things happening around us. Despite the many challenges facing our country, there's no doubt that India is really the hotbed for social entrepreneurship in this part of the world. Some of the social solutions that our social entrepreneurs create can not only transform our society, but make a difference in other developing markets too. But that's not enough. We have to turn this into a wider movement, a movement that taps into the creative energies of every employee, every business leader, and every entrepreneur in his family. At Forbes India and at Network 18, we believe we have a special responsibility to make that happen. The annual Forbes India Philanthropy Awards is our way of recognizing entrepreneurs and business leaders who stepped up to the challenge of serving our people, especially those underprivileged who need the support. When we first conceptualized the award, there were many naysayers. Philanthropy is a very private space, we were told. How on earth will you gather data to build nominations? And finally, even if you pass those hurdles, be prepared for a situation where the winners refuse to accept awards. Where there's a will, there's a way, and it starts with a clear purpose. All along, we had just one consistent message, that we need more public conversations around philanthropy. And the best way to galvanize more people into action is to create a learning platform that helps share best practices. We're throwing this open beyond this room. For instance, what you see on these big screens, what the world can see live on our YouTube channel, and our social media team is sharing the highlights of this evening's show on Twitter and on Facebook. We'd also invited Give India as our knowledge partner. That was really a masterstroke, because between Venkat Krishnan and Dhaval Ludani, they had the wisdom and the experience to help us build a superb set of nominations. Our distinguished jury, led by Mr. Narayan Vagul, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Devi Shetty, and Mr. Madhav Chauhan, spent an entire afternoon debating the pros and cons of our nominations. For some of us who were there, I can tell you it was a scintillating conversation. And I'm truly honored that almost all of them are here with us to lend their support to this initiative. I'm also very happy that we picked Bangalore to host these inaugural awards. The response has been incredible. I stand before a distinguished audience that has some of the most influential entrepreneurs and business leaders from the city, as well as a few who've traveled from outside the city, especially to be with us this evening. Thank you for taking time off to support this initiative. We're truly delighted that many of the nominees of the inaugural Forbes India Philanthropy Awards are also here with us. Our hope is that business should emerge as a strong force for good, and that our list of nominees for each of the 10 awards will continue to grow as more and more people from the world of business step up and find exciting new ways to give back to society. My colleagues and I thank you for the support, and we've planned this as an interactive evening. So I'd urge you to participate actively so that we can learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajay. Let's start now with our first award of the evening, Outstanding Philanthropist. This is our flagship award. It recognizes an individual whose contributions of time, money, and expertise have brought new thinking into solving complex social issues. They have taken responsibility for results by empowering stakeholders, bringing in best practices, and leveraging their networks. Their example encourages others to take leadership roles in their communities, the country, and the world. And the nominees are the Azim Premji Foundation aims to contribute to achieving quality universal education. Sunil Mittal's Bharti Foundation provides free education to underprivileged children in remote villages with special focus on the girl child. Ajay Piramal is personally involved in every cause he supports. His family funds the Piramal Foundation that spends 100 crore rupees on welfare projects every year. Hemendra Kothari's Wildlife Conservation Trust generates alternative skills and employment for villagers in forest areas. Anji Reddy has spent the bulk of his earnings to fund initiatives to alleviate hunger, create livelihoods, provide education and access to safe drinking water, and to pull children out from hazardous industries. Shiv Nadar has contributed to India's educational system by setting up the Shiv Nadar University and running Vidya Gyan, schools to provide free education to rural toppers. To announce the winner, we have the chairman of our jury, a man who's not just a legend in the world of banking, but has also had a long history of giving back, serving as a mentor and board member of a number of philanthropic organizations. Please join me in welcoming to the stage with the microphone, Mr. Vagul. Mr. Vagul, could you tell us who the winner is and tell us a little bit about him?
The Outstanding Philanthropist Award goes to Azim Premji.
Mr. Premji. Could you stay on stage? So, Mr. Vagul, would you like to tell us, you've known Mr. Premji for a great number of years, could you tell us a little bit about him?
It's very difficult to talk about a person whom you know for 30 years. And equally more difficult to talk about a person who is generally regarded as an intensely private person. Very shy and publicity, doesn't want anything to be talked about him. And more than anything else, I have to respect that sentiment from his side. But I should say a couple of things. Number one is that I've been associated with him, and he has been talking about the educational initiative, not in recent times, but for a very long time. I still recall an event, I don't know whether you remember it, about 15 years back or something like that. One day you called me when I was in Chennai and said that when you're coming for the Wipro meeting, can you come a little early, by an earlier flight, and I want to have a chat with you. That he does normally. And I came in, went to his room, he was looking very concerned. He told me, Vagula, I'm very disturbed. Obviously, I thought that he must have been disturbed about what is happening to this company or anything like that. He said, I'm very disturbed that for election duty, our teachers are being used. Is there some way of preventing this from happening? I don't know whether you remember that conversation. And I told him this has been happening for the last 5 decades. We are using it. No, I think this is not fair. Our children are being deprived of this education. This is long before he ever thought of taking into a major initiative on education. Later in the evening, he called me again. I said, before you go to the airport, can you just drop him for a while? I went in. This time here was Dr. Raganekar was with him. And then he said, we must do something about it, we can't keep quiet. Why don't we take this initiative with the Prime Minister? I told him these things just don't work out that way in government. But the amount of concern which he had, that the children were being deprived of education for just a week or 10 days, I think was truly amazing. And a long time back, 15 years back, he told me that something which touched my heart. I still remember it and I will not forget it. That the wealth which I earn doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the society. As a young child, in my teens, I was influenced by Gandhi and Nehru. I was greatly influenced by Gandhi's concept of trusteeship. And Gandhi would say that the wealthy people should always regard the wealth as something which belongs to as a trust. They are only the trustees of the society. I could see Premji echoing almost a similar sentiment as though it was coming from a person like Gandhiji. And he did then tell me, look here, I want you to keep it to yourself. This is what I want to do with regard to my wealth. But I don't want this to be public. I kept that confidence. I kept it till he made it proper to make an announcement about formation of the Azim Premji Foundation. I think it gives me considerable personal pleasure in handing over this award to him, and I'm grateful to Forbes India for facilitating the happening of this great event, an event which I will cherish all the time. Thank you, Premji.
Mr. Premji, if you could ask you to stay on stage for just a minute. We have one brief question for you, Mr. Premji. Your foundation has been now active for over a decade. Could you just tell us a little about what your plans are for the next few years?
We have been active for about 11 years, but we have really stepped up our operation over the past two and a half years. You know, as a supplement or as a complement, I would say as a complement to our foundation, we've also formed a not-for-profit university, which today has about 230 students and about 70 professors. But we are scaling up very massively there. And what we do in the university is teach education professionals, community development professionals, and we work in the field. Our objective is that we have to get more results. And we have to scale up much more significantly at a grassroots level in the field. So we're doing a lot of work in the field now, supplemented and complemented by our university.
Thank you, Mr. Premji, and thank you, Mr. Vagul. Good luck in your future efforts, Mr. Premji, with the foundation. Thank you very much for being with us. Over to you now, Meetu.
Thank you, Peter. Our next award is the Distinguished Family of the Year. This award honors families who have dedicated their wealth to the public good, but more than the money donated, they have invested time and resources and created impact for the long term. They've also been able to preserve and pass on this tradition of giving back across generations. The nominees are the Murugappa family set up the AMM Foundation through the $4.4 billion Murugappa Group and the family. Ajay and Swati Piramal and their daughter Nandini and son Anand are all involved in the work of the Piramal Foundation, and Piramal Healthcare launched a new foundation last year. Shivnada chairs the Shivnada Foundation, with which his wife Kiran, daughter Roshni, son-in-law Shikhar Malhotra are closely linked. The Godrej family has a long tradition of philanthropic initiatives. Adi Godrej has turned more than 1,000 acres of land owned by him and his family into the Sunabai Pirojsha Godrej Marine Ecology Center. Rohini Nilakini donated about $40 million to various causes, and with Nandan Nilakini gave 50 crore rupees to the Indian Institute for Human Settlements to fund a school for the environment. To announce the winner, we'd like to request a member of our jury, Mr. Vagul, back on the stage, please.
The Distinguished Family Award goes to Murugappan family.
Mr. Vagul, could you say a few words about the family?
I'll be quite brief. I don't think that there was any debate on this. This is a family which has been in philanthropy not for one generation or two generations, but 4 generations. And it's part of the DNA of this family. I think it was widely acknowledged. And here is another person whom I know personally very well. And for him, I think the social cause is something which is as dear to him as with every other member of the family. It was my proud privilege to be associated with the producers like M.E. Arunachalam and M.M. Arunachalam. All of them had that same DNA. I think to honor this enormous amount of contribution which this family has made to the society, not during the last few years, but over a whole lot of generations, I think the jury unanimously felt that Murugappa family is the right choice for this award.
Thank you, Mr. Vagul. Mr. Subaya, we have a very small question for you. You and your family have kept the tradition of giving alive for 4 generations now. Do you think your family is blessed with a giving gene, or do you have another secret recipe?
I think it's part of the Indian culture of the Vaisyas anywhere. I mean, this is something which we all don't understand. The modern India doesn't understand. The Vaisya community always kept something away from the profits for giving back to society. And what Thirukural says, knowledge and wealth, if it's not shared, it's useless. And I think that's what I learned when I was 4 years old from my grandfather. And I think that continues. And he started it in 1924. And we believe to keep that tradition going, we should continue with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subaya. Thank you, Mr. Vagul.
And now to our next award. This is the Corporate Catalyst Award. This award is for a senior business leader who promoted philanthropy not just in his or her company, but across the entire industry, inspiring others to join these causes. He or she has helped set up institutions, influenced and mentored other executives, provided financial and business support, and brought in innovative solutions from outside the non-profit world. And the nominees are running briefly through them again, as we did with the last award. Anand Mahindra runs several foundations for charitable causes. He's on the board of directors of the Nandi Foundation. Mr. Vagul helped start the ICICI Foundation and played a catalytic role setting up Pratham. He's also on the board of the Azim Premji Foundation and Give India. In 2010, he helped start the First Givers Club. Ratan Tata has worked with top personalities in the field of philanthropy and is in talks with Bill Gates that might lead to a foundation to advise future philanthropists. Anji Reddy founded the Nandi Foundation and Dr. Reddy's Foundation for Human and Social Development. He has pledged to donate 1 crore rupee every year for 10 years, starting in 2006, to the L.V. Prasad Eye Institute. Under Deepak Parekh, HDFC supported several social initiatives in the areas of education, child welfare, and medical research, among others. To give away this award, we'd like to call upon another illustrious member of our jury. He has had a distinguished career in academia and is a creative contributor in the fields of adult literacy, elementary education, sanitation, and the development sector in general. He is co-founder and CEO of Pratham. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Madhav Chavan. Dr. Chavan, could you please announce the winner?
Before I announce the winner, you've noticed that Mr. Vagul was the chairman of the jury and he was also nominated in this category, which may sound like a packed jury, but Mr. Vagul was insisting to the last minute that he should not be a nominee, and even in the meeting of the jury he insisted that he should not be nominated at all. But the rest of the jury vetoed him out, and at that point he reclused himself, went out, and we started talking about the merits and so on. So now let me declare the winner. Actually, I don't like the word winner, but you keep saying that word. So this year's recognition, I would say, because all of them are great people. A corporate catalyst is for Mr. N. Vagul.
Congratulations, Mr. Vagul.
I'm supposed to say some things about you. See, this is quite embarrassing for him, I know, and it's embarrassing for me because I'm the Shishya and he's the Guru, and I'm announcing, I told Indrajit that I cannot give him the award. He was the first corporate chairman I ever met. I had never met a corporate chairman before. And I can't resist telling you the story, which he hotly denies. You know which one I'm going to tell. And you are not allowed to deny. So when we were setting up Pratham way back in '95, we were looking for a person who would be actually a catalyst for raising funds for Pratham. And the UNICEF, the municipal commissioner said, I will talk to Mr. Vagul. He talked to him. Mr. Sharad Kale then called me and said, why don't you write a letter to Mr. Vagul? He's agreed to be on the board of Pratham. I said, fine. I wrote a nice letter saying, thank you very much, and etc., etc. And 3 days later, I get a letter back. First time I had ever seen a letter on a corporate, nice, stationery and all that, which said, I regret that I'm too busy and I cannot come. I could not understand what that was because the municipal commissioner said that he had agreed, and the letter said he could not come. We did not know what to do. Then, Mr. Premji, Madhukar, he was working with us as a volunteer from ICICI Securities. He said, well, what's the harm? Let's go meet him. Because I've heard that he's a great guy. I said, let's go. Where's the harm? So we went, we got an appointment. He's a very approachable man, incredibly approachable, which I did not believe at that time. We went there in his room, and he was sitting there. And there were many of his officers sitting there. And I had to start the conversation somehow. I said, sorry that you cannot join the board of trustees. And he says, who said that? I almost fell out of my chair. I said, sir, but you sent me a letter. He said, don't worry about that. Aban, my secretary, is under instructions to say no to such things because I'm extremely busy. But now I'm planning to get out of my business, and so I actually want to join. But Aban must have just, put it under my nose and I must have signed it. He hotly denies it, but Madhukar and I will stand by the story all the time. So if Mr. Vagul, if we had not persisted and gone to him, I don't think I would be standing here. Within 30 minutes of that meeting, he changed my life. That's the only way to describe it. He listened to what I was saying. I was much younger, much younger then. And it was incredible that he heard it, he got the basics of it, and his staff was asking, so what will happen, this, that, and the other. He said, what are you asking this young man? The country is spending so much money on education, getting so little, and he's asking for a little bit of money. Why are we asking him so many questions? You go ahead, Madhav, and we'll support you. And then he actually started sitting with people in the slums. That was another funny thing. His Hindi, I don't know how many of you have heard him speak Hindi, and their English was a combination. As a result, we had a great organization called Pratham. So, and I thought I was special until I started meeting more and more people who kept saying he does that to everybody. That's exactly what a catalyst is. I think he's one of the, wealthiest man in India, I would call him, because what belongs to Premji belongs to him. He's on his foundation. What belongs to Mr. Subaya belongs to him. What belongs to Piramal belongs to him. This is what, in modern terminology, is called social capital. And he uses that social capital effectively to trust people, to support them, to help them along, to guide them with wisdom and not control. And so I have the utmost respect for this one single individual.
Thank you.
Hello. Mr. Bagal, we have one question from you. As we said, we seek to learn from each of our, you said I couldn't say winners, from one of our awardees. Will that pass, sir? Okay. You've spent a lifetime mentoring people, lending your support. When you are asked to lend your support to a philanthropic cause, what is that one little spark that you look for that helps you decide whether to support that person in their endeavor?
4 sparks, not one. First, I test for the selflessness of the person, whether he wants to do it for his purpose or is just absolutely selfless. The second is it coming out of love and compassion for the fellow human beings? Is it deep within that person? Third is sense of passion for that cause, for which, and finally, the commitment which the person can really give to this cause. If these 4 are there, or if most of the 4 are there, I think I would pledge my support. I would walk with them the extra mile. He talked about the success stories of our meeting the chairman. There were a large number of failures also. We met chairman who rebuffed us, who said, okay, thank you, Mr. Vagul, we have heard you, we'll do something, but never came back. So, but these are the 4 things I look for in the person.
Thank you, Mr. Vagul. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you, Dr. Chavan. Over now to Meetu.
Thank you, Peter. We now take a small break from the awards for our first fireside chat. We're going to discuss leadership in philanthropy. In this session, we explore what motivates leaders to embrace philanthropy and how India Inc. needs to bring a stronger giving culture. Our anchor co-founded Mindtree is a best-selling business author and writes a hugely popular column for Forbes India, Zen Garden, where he talks to entrepreneurs about their unique roads to success. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Subrato Bagchi. Joining Mr. Bagchi on our panel, please give a warm welcome once again to Mr. Azim Premji. Mr. N. Vagul. and Mr. M.B. Subaya. Over to you, Mr. Bagchi.
Thanks, Vitu, and thanks, Peter. As you can see, I'm in the company of giants, and it's a personal honor and an honor on behalf of the industry to which I belong that I have the privilege of doing this fireside chat with you. Three great institution builders and three people with impeccable personal integrity. These are individuals who have done a lifetime of work. And the way that I look at them, three of them bring very interesting aspects to the whole subject of philanthropy. Mr. Subaya, for example, as all of us know, his family has been doing this for more than a century now. And I see a lot of inclusion in the Murugappa story. You basically begin by practicing what you preach to the outside world for your own people, building hospitals and educational institutions for your workers. So I see the theme of inclusion as a very strong theme, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And Mr. Vagul, you obviously have been known for looking at an organization as a platform for making social change. So on one hand, you were a banker all your life, but that's probably the greatest understatement of the century. But nonetheless, you started your life as a probationary officer at State Bank of India, became chairman of banks, taught. But really through all this, you created the institution as a platform for social change. So I see that, whereas I see a theme of inclusion here, I see the institution building as a platform. Ms. Premji, when I look at you in terms of capacity creation. You've always believed in capacity creation, whether in enterprise or also today in philanthropy. So on that broad note, I have three questions to the three great men, and a couple of minutes each. The first question is, tell us about a personal turning point in your journey of philanthropy as you look at the ferment, because leaders bring onto table the deep personal experiences, and that begins to shape the vision, the mission, and inspires a whole body of people to do great things. So is there one deep personal experience, a point that really touched you in your journey? So shall we go with Mr. Subaya first?
I think the first one for me was my grandfather, who took me to the Ganesh temple, which he had built after his house was built in 1917. And he said, we built this temple in 1920, after my first 3 years in Burma and after making money and coming back. And so I said, why? And he said, it's very simple. When you have a well in your house, the water is available only for the family. When you do well in your business, you've got to share it, and you have to have a temple tank so that you share it with the community. And that's something which all our children and grandchildren should continue to do. I think that was the turning point for me too.
And you're all of 4 years old at that time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Mr. Vagul?
For me, the turning point was my interaction with my mentor, who was the chairman of the State Bank of India at that time, Mr. R.K. Talwar. I mean, not many people knew that right from the time he joined the bank, those days the salaries were in the region of about 400 rupees or something like that. He resolved that 10% of whatever he earns would go for a public cause. And he was telling me a story of how, at the time of his posting in Calcutta, his wife became very seriously ill, critically ill, and he had to spend a lot of money, and savings were not there. He was just an employee. And then he said, what I meant possibly by 10% is 10% of my basic pay, not the total emoluments. And it's a compromise which he reached. So he was narrating to me the story when he became chairman and I was his secretary. And he said, when I became a chairman, All my allowances were amalgamated with the basic pay. And then the basic pay was equal to my total emoluments, which are not large. I think he was chairman in 1969, 4,000 rupees. And he said he would generally say, keep 400 rupees. And my job was to find the public cause for which that money has to be spent. I think that was the turning point. And I said, this is the man.
How old were you roughly when
I was about in my late 20s.
Late 20s. Because I will link that to a question that I have for all of you subsequently. We'll come to that. But let's go to Mr. Premji. Mr. Premji, your turning point.
You know, I think Vagul summarized it very well.
No, we want your turning point, not his turning point.
No, what he summarized very well so far as I'm concerned. I think my turning point was when I realized 15 years back that school teachers were being used for election duty.
Oh, that story, okay.
Yes, it's amazing. But that's the respect the government gives to education.
But in your family, your father was a great philanthropist himself. And the story goes that he paid more attention to that than to his own business, till such time that he passed away, unfortunately, and you had to come back. And did you take a long time between coming in and taking the reins of business and then probably taking on from where he had left, or there is no such connection? You have your own self-realization and own philosophy in now giving shape to the Azim Premji brand of philanthropy. I know you don't talk about Wipro there.
No, I just think that it took me a long time to really wake up to the realities of what needed to be done. So there was a long period where, you keep thinking of things and doing nothing, and thinking of things and doing nothing is meaningless, really. But my father had a tradition for it. My mother had an even more intense tradition for it, because she devoted her whole life to the Children's Orthopedic Hospital for polio children and cerebral palsy children. And she's a doctor, and she never practiced medicine. And she virtually devoted her life from 26 to 75 for it, 50 years.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the next question, and Ms. Vagul, I was talking about your age. So here comes the connection. Number of young people would be watching, all of you, and listening to this conversation. So if we look at today's 22-year-old, 24-year-old, what would you tell them that they could do in their lives today without being a Vagul or a Premji or a Subaya, so that they can start early?
Frankly, I think when I look at the present generation show a much greater degree of passion and commitment to the social causes than what we were capable of at our age. We were interested, but the amount of passion and commitment which I see in the younger generation is amazing. And they are the people who are going to transform this society. I think the transformation of the society, at least, it's a very frank assessment, whether you like it or not, that is not going to come from the government. It is going to come from these youngsters. How are we going to galvanize that energy of these youngsters?
So, like we're talking with Mr. Talwar's impression and impact on you, and he actually brought forward something very simple that then, almost changed the course of things for you. So what is that one thing you'd like to tell the youngster of today, 22-year-old, 24-year-old?
And this is, they are the future of India. They are the people who are really shaping the society. And the society cannot be shaped unless there is a passion and commitment for the well-being of the society. The love and compassion for the fellow human beings is something which has to become an intrinsic part of the growing up of these youngsters. I think that's a message which we have to constantly get it across to them. And from out of this comes out the platform for change.
Yeah, that's very well said. Mr. Subay, would you like to take on from there and suggest one or two specific things that a youngster can begin by doing?
In my way of looking at it, I wouldn't start at the age of 22. I would start at the age of 4. I like the 4-year-olds. I would suggest that they have 3 piggy banks,
Okay.
and have one for themselves. When somebody gives them these days they give checks, so I don't know. So my grandsons, I've got them to open 3 accounts in the banks. One is for for themselves. They decide whatever somebody gives as for their birthdays or something like that. They decide they'll give one part of it for themselves, one for a rainy day, and one for sharing with their not so well-off children of their own age group. And if they open those accounts and start thinking of it from the age of 4, I think at the age of 22, they'll have much better ideas to use their passion.
Very nice. Mr. Premji, what do you think you'd like to tell the 22-year-old or 24, maybe 4-year-old? Your grandson is how old now?
Grandson?
Grandson?
3.
Okay, so what did you ask him to do? So
he's very busy with other things at the moment. So I don't think he'd listen to such erudite things anymore, at least for some time. But I think it's very important. I find young people talk a lot about social service, involvement. The reality is, what are they doing about it? How much of their skin is in the game? And what are the sacrifices or the devotion of time, effort, and commitment they're willing to make to it? Having nice talk about it, having nice social discussions about it is really meaningless. Get on and act. There's so many opportunities by which you can act.
I remember when I used to work for you, we used to talk about commitment to commitment, actually acting it out. So I seem to be hearing from you that beyond just making your electronic votes and doing the support on Facebook and Twitter, you have to do something really with your own 2 hands. And so you see the glass half empty there, not half full.
No, I can't make a value judgment on this because it varies so much from people to people. And we've been now working in the field for a long time, and it's amazing some of the sacrifices people make, absolutely beyond imagination. Ladies who are willing to teach in remote schools, separated 90% of the time from their family and their husbands. So there's a huge degree of commitment. People who have a huge future vis-a-vis their education background, willing to turn completely turtle and take 60-70% cuts in salary and work in social work. So there's a really mixed bag on this. Extraordinary commitment from people.
On that point, I do have one question, and I'm sure a lot of listeners and viewers have that, and that is related to the larger socioeconomic context today. On one hand, here is the power of doing good, and on the other hand, all you have to do is to read the morning newspaper tomorrow to really feel deflated. So are you, each one of you, are you candles in the wind? And how do you deal with, your own sense of futility when you look at your work and look at what's going on around, whether it is the politicians, whether it is business community, whether it is others as well. So doesn't it deflate you when you wake up in the morning?
I have 2 simple principles on this. Don't try to be holier than thou. Okay, and the second one is you have to cultivate a sense of insensitivity to things in life.
You have to have selective insensitivity.
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, it just completely suffocates you.
What's your take on that, Mr. Babu?
I agree with you. You do feel depressed when you read the newspaper. I think the uppermost thought in my mind, I keep on talking to my colleagues in respect of that. I see a lot of energy around. How are we going to mobilize and channelize the energy for the cause? Because today what is happening is this energy is diffused. People are doing here and there quite a lot of things. That also depresses me because I don't see that sense of collective effort on the part of so many people who are bursting with energy and saying that how are you going to channelize it? In fact, if at all I have another life to live, or if I have some more years, I would like to spend in trying to bring about a greater coordination of this social sector so that we make an impact on the society. It is the lack of impact which depresses me in the morning. That's why I prefaced my statement by saying, I don't expect anything to come from the government. We need to think in terms of a different pattern of the organization, which is apolitical, which is not political in that sense, but at the same time, which galvanizes the energy of the young people. We don't know the answer yet.
So on that note, Ms. Subaya, do you think that India has the fertility condition on the ground in a socio-economic sense to really make one light up the whole universe? How do you deal with this issue? How do you maintain your positivism? How has the family maintained it over the last 100+ years?
Whatever I understood and whatever values that I have today, I believe came to me when I was very young, between the 4 to 9. And psychologists also say that that's the most, almost 80-90% of the IQ comes at that level. So my thing is, and those values in this country came through ethics. Ethics came from epics, and there was storytelling. I can remember very clearly all the stories and from Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Upanishads, which I was told when they put me to sleep. And those where our values came from. So what I'm trying to do is to try and get these storytelling habit back into the school system so that the values start, so that 30, 40 years from now, we'll have a better society to live in.
Very well said, very well said. And I think we are coming pretty much close to the end of our conversation. Sometimes I struggle with this question myself because I was raised as a child to believe that the job of good is to fight bad. The whole universe is about the struggle between good and bad. And I'm beginning to think that the job of good is not to fight bad because bad must ultimately cancel itself. And the job of good is to do good. And that's what you people are doing. So on that note, thank you very much, and over to Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Bagchi. Could we request you to stay on stage, please? We have a few questions for members of our audience. And if you feel that you would like to chip in at any point, or perhaps an audience member may want to, address something to you, could we ask you to just stay on for a few more minutes, please? The first question I have here is for Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. My question to you is, you've put together partnerships with, for instance, Dr. Devi Shetty, with the Cornell Weill Medical College. How easy or difficult is it for someone who's been used to the world of business to manage these collaborations in the world of philanthropy?
First and foremost, I think the kind of partnerships I form are with people who are change makers themselves. And I think basically what I'm trying to do is, how do I work with such people to catalyze even bigger change? I think that's what it is. So I think, for instance, with Dr. Devi Shetty, my partnership with Dr. Devi Shetty was in the field of healthcare. He had built a very commendable, affordable cardiac care model. And my view was that cancer was another area which required to address affordability. So my point was that if I could work, I had a chat with Dr. Devi Shetty and I said, do you think it's possible to build an affordable cancer care model? And he said, well, I'm sure it is. And he said, but I don't have the resources to create a cancer hospital to begin with. And I said, well, that's what I can do for you. But let's work together to create this cancer hospital, which is going to be an affordable cancer care model. But more importantly, I was also very, very passionate about a research-driven medical model. So I said, now, that's something which we need to start in this country. Can I catalyze that as well? So I think you work with people who are catalysts of change themselves, and you are also catalyzing that change by lending support and making sure that you have a sense of purpose. I think at the end of the day, philanthropy is about making a difference, is about giving back to your community, is about bringing out positive change. So you work with people who believe in that. So my collaborations are with people who are making a difference, and I want to work with them to make an even bigger difference.
Thank you, ma'am. Beetu, you're ready for your question now?
Yes, thank you, Peter. My question is for Mr. Pai. Mr. Pai, good evening. You helped set up the Akshay Patra movement, and you also have worked for many years in business. The two worlds are different. You need a lot of patience in philanthropic work. In business, you're expecting quick results. The question is, how do you reconcile these two ends? How do you manage that?
Well, in my case, I worked with Madhu Pandit to start the Akshay Patra Foundation to deliver a midday meal, more to assuage the guilt feeling that I had because I was so very successful. I've done so well. When I walk on the street, I saw children putting their hands out, children who are hungry, children who don't have food for themselves, women carrying children in the hands with no food. I said I must do something. Then I was reminded of the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.G. Ramachandran, who started the biggest midday meal program in India and was so successful that women worshipped him for feeding their greatest possession, their child. So I had this guilt complex, so when I met Madhu Pandit, suggested to him, and he asked me to give some money, I did it. And I did not expect anything that I would have expected in business. It was just to assert my guilt. We started with 1,500 children, went to 30,000, went to 100,000, went to 500,000, went to 1 million. Now we do 1.3 million meals a day across 9,000 schools. So business is very different, and this was very different. And I think this program gave a new meaning to my life. It gave me a new sense of energy, a purpose in my life, and took away the feeling of emptiness that success in business brings you. Because business success means you do well, you make money, you grow, you meet analysts, you talk about success, you travel around the world, and you show very well. But it's the same. There's no happiness. The true happiness comes when you sacrifice, like Mr. Wagul said, and serve everybody else who's not so fortunate, because I seem to have won the OIRN lottery, like Manish Sabharwal said. I've been very lucky. There's so many people who are not lucky. So I think, for me, it's a very different calling, and my mind is very clear that business is separate, but it's very important to bring the business principles of reviews, of scalability, of execution, of strategy, of good PR, and building relationships to run a large philanthropic activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pai. That was very well put. Peter?
The next person we have a question for is someone who I am reasonably willing to bet everyone in this room would have sampled his beverages up to now, Mr. Siddhartha. You're a first-generation entrepreneur. Do you feel that if you just focus on growing your business, just getting more and more CCDs out there, thereby giving employment to more and more people, changing lives along that way, creating opportunity, would you have been doing your duty just with that? Or do you feel that there is perhaps an expectation that your wealth must be given back in some way to society?
See, being from Bangalore, Mr. Premji and Nandan are my role models. See, whatever little bit success we had in business, I think it is incidental. I personally feel we are successful thanks to our society. Society has given us opportunity for the last 25 years. So as a family, we believe a decent portion of our earnings should go for not-for-profit. That's it.
Thank you. Neetu?
Thank you, Peter. My next question is for Rishad Premji. Hi, Rishad. Hi. Can I request you to stand? Thank you. So Mr. Subaya was talking about those 3 piggy banks, for 4-year-olds. And Mr. Premji mentioned that you have a 3-year-old. Some time ago, and a 4-year-old. So, great. Some time ago, you were telling me that, you understood from a very young age that, the wealth that your father was earning was to be given away. As a parent, how do you inculcate the same values in your children and in your family?
So, can you hear me? Yeah, me too. I don't think there's any magic answer to that, right? I personally feel very strongly that it is the responsibility of those who are privileged to help the non-privileged. So I feel hopefully over time I can inculcate those same values in my children. I feel that I haven't done anything to earn this wealth, so I have no right on it. So I don't feel my children should have any right on it. There's no magic answer. It's about teaching them how lucky they are, about exposing them to the realities of the world that we live in. And the example that Mr. Subaya shared, he actually shared that with me a few months ago. I don't know if he remembers that. But it was a very telling example. And the point he didn't share in this example was that he said invariably the children distributed a third, a third, a third. So I'm actually going to try it on my, my daughter's next birthday when she turns 5 in March, and my son when he turns 4 in June. It'll be a great experiment. So I think it's a great example of just teaching people very early on, even with candy or whatever it is, about distributing that and sharing it. So.
Thank you. Aditi, would you like to add a line or two to that? No? Sorry to put you on spot, but yeah, thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Peter.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for that wonderful discussion. Thank you, all of you in the audience who we've asked questions now. We'll just take a minute now for the staff to replenish the platters on your table, just about a minute or two, and then we'll continue on.
Ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention back, please? We now move on to our next batch of awards. First, the award for the Outstanding Corporate Foundation. This award honors a foundation that has taken up a social issue and has long-term vision, strategy, a sustainable model, and has created significant impact in its chosen area. And the nominees are 25% of the Godrej Group's dividends are channelized into philanthropic activities through trusts. The Dr. Reddy's Foundation, through vocational training programs, it addresses the issues of employability, income generation, and improvement in the quality of life. The Tata Trusts are the largest philanthropy initiative in India with annual disbursements of over 500 crore rupees. They also have the largest network of partners or NGOs to disburse funds. Bharti Foundation plans to build 500 primary schools and 50 secondary schools that will enroll 100,000 students by 2013. The Infosys Foundation donates 1% of its net profit to the foundation that improves healthcare infrastructure, supports primary education, rehabilitates abandoned women and children, and preserves Indian art and culture. To announce the winner, welcome on stage Mr. M.V. Subaya. Mr. Subaya, please tell us who won the award.
Tata Trust.
May we request Mr. A.N. Singh, Managing Trustee, Sir Dorabji Tata Trust.
The country's longest serving, most diverse, and largest philanthropic initiatives that impact millions of Indians each year.
Mr. Singh, may I ask you a question, please? The Tata Trusts are seen as a role model by many corporations who are keen to set up their own foundations. Are there two pieces of advice you would give them that would be truly instructive?
Well, advice is a risky business, but I can venture out being a part of a more than 100-year-old institution. To say one, I think the foundation stone of this architecture has to be really deeply rooted in sustainability, and which would mean that short-term profit or loss should not disturb the equation. And secondly, of course, for a startup, I think the focus is very necessary. So if you keep focused and you have a measurement tool with you, I think you'll succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you, Mr. Subaya. Thank you. Peter, over to you.
Our next award is the Good Company Award. This award recognizes pioneering strategic initiatives undertaken by large business corporations where they have used market-based models to balance the twin objectives of doing well while also doing social good. And the nominees are Jain Irrigation Systems developed micro-irrigation systems that reduced water usage and raised annual incomes of small farmers significantly. Novartis Arogya Parivar works to increase access to medicine in rural India. It uses Novartis's generics manufacturer Sandoz to produce drugs at low cost. Britannia Nutrition Foundation is an independent, autonomous, non-profit entity that leverages the strengths of Britannia's wide stakeholder network to address child malnutrition. Tata Chemicals with Tata Swachh, a low-cost water purifier designed for consumers with low income, and it aims to ease access to clean drinking water. GE, Embrace, General Electric has partnered with Embrace to launch a low-cost infant warmer that saves lives in rural India. To announce the award, may we invite co-founder and currently CEO and MD, Infosys, Mr. Shibulal, to help us announce the winner.
And the winner is Jain Irrigation Systems Limited.
Mr. Babarlal Jain, founder and chairman, Jain Irrigation. Could you come up and accept the Good Company Award, please?
And raise the annual incomes of millions of small farmers in India.
Congratulations, sir. We'd like to ask you one question here. You faced a lot of ups and downs in the work that you do. How have you kept yourself going without losing hope? Have you ever thought you could perhaps choose an easier route?
Well, the first question is, how have we crossed these hurdles that my work inherently has? When you're talking of agriculture, you almost cease to be talking about top line, bottom line, EBITDA, and so on. Because we propose and he disposes. When it comes to nature, there is no answer except hard work. And every time I cultivate that consciously, that everything we have to do, we should do it ourselves, and as far as possible, with our own hands. Now that culture keeps me going. Yes, ups and downs are part of life. And if you really want to complete a full circle of life, you need to have failures, because they are the greatest teachers. Coming to the last part of the question, what was that? Can you read that?
Sir, have you thought of that perhaps you could have taken an easier route?
Yeah. See, this is another very strange thing. I have never thought of that, but people keep reminding me. Why did you not get into software? Why did you not get into, TV building? Why did you not do this? You are such a short fellow, but they say that I'm a sharp fellow. So why did you not do all this? Why did you get into this damn agriculture where everywhere it is a failure? And even the banks have failed, big institutions have failed, large institutions have failed. How can you afford to be successful? Now, that question never touched me, because I never worked for what they thought that I'm working for. I worked for a cause, I worked for a purpose. And the purpose was to make a difference to the lives of millions of people. We are able to do that. And that kind of a feeling is so warm that doesn't provide any room for you to think of these things, which otherwise come to your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Thank you, Mr. Shibulal. I did notice a few people in the audience looking slightly disbelieving when he said that software was safer. But anyway.
Thank you, Peter. We'll now move on to the next award, the Next Generation Leader in Philanthropy. This award recognizes the accomplishments and contributions of emerging leaders, outstanding individuals who have clearly signaled their intent through meaningful giving, have also begun to contribute significant time, skills, and resources to the causes they have helped advance. The nominees are Ashish Dhawan set up the Central Square, a venture philanthropy fund for improving educational outcomes for kids from low-income families. Asit Kotecha started the Mumbai chapter of LIFE. One of their biggest projects was Habitat for Humanity, which provides housing for the poor. Amit Mukherjee was involved in building Dasra and launched the Dasra Giving Circles to bring together philanthropists who contribute to an organization over 3 years. Dasra has channeled over 12 crore rupees in 2 years. Kalpana Morparia is involved in various charitable activities like the SOS Children's Village. She's donated 1.5 crore rupees to the Bharti Foundation and is now a part of their board. Vineet Nair sold most of his stake in HCL, a part of which will go towards funding his charity Sampark that works with schools to improve the quality of education. Amit Chandra serves as the trustee and board member of the Akanksha Foundation, addressing issues of formal and non-formal education. To announce the winner, please join me in welcoming the founder of Give India, Mr. Venkat Krishnan. Venkat, please tell us who won the award. Congratulations, Ashish, the next-gen leader in philanthropy.
Our department uses business acumen to set up a venture philanthropy fund to improve educational outcomes for poor children.
Ashish, you've spent a long time in the private equity and venture capital business. What is the one thing that you learned there that you think works equally well in philanthropy?
You know, in private equity, you're really not doing anything operational. You're really betting on people. And I think in philanthropy, at least the way I approach it, is really to work through other people. And so it's really finding the best people, which is difficult to do often in the social sector, and then defining clear objectives, sort of what Mohan talked about, bringing some of the same things that we have learned in the corporate world, use metrics to measure what the organizations are doing. Those are some of the things that I'll carry with me to this new world.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Venkat. Peter, over to you.
Our next award is something we call the Crossover Leader. This award seeks to recognize a professional who has made the transition from a corporate career to work for the social or not-for-profit sector, and who has served as an inspiration and role model for others. The nominees are Nachiket Moore left ICICI Bank for the ICICI Foundation. He provided a working alternative to the traditional microfinance model and is in the process of disrupting the primary health services model. Ramesh Ramanathan left Citibank to co-found Janagraha, an organization devoted to improving the quality of life in urban India. Last year, he got a low-cost housing project venture off the ground. Mehmood Khan quit as head of global innovation at Unilever to bring about a remarkable transformation in one of the poorest districts of Haryana, Mewat. Ramji Raghavan left Citibank to create the Agastya International Foundation, which has brought hands-on science education to nearly 2.5 million disadvantaged children. Dilip Ranjekar, after many successful years at Wipro, was instrumental in setting up the Azim Premji Foundation in 2001. Nihal Kaviratne was chairman of Unilever Indonesia. He set up St. Jude India Childcare to provide shelter for families who visit Mumbai for cancer treatment for their kids. Ladies and gentlemen, to announce the next award, the winner of the next award, please welcome the chairman of Manipal Universal Learning, Mr. Mohandas Pai. Tell us who won, Mr. Pai.
Well, the crossover leader, none other than Nachiket Moore. Congratulations, Nachiket.
Please congratulate Nachiket, the winner of the Crossroad Leader.
Tackle pressing social problems, providing a working alternative to the traditional microfinance and healthcare models.
Nachiket, a question for you. Many were very surprised when you chose to walk away from what most of the world would consider a job they would kill for. In the prime of your life, many years ahead of you, glowing path, all of that, you chose to walk away. Looking back on that time, since you did take this decision, and in the years since then, could you tell us what is the most important lesson you have learned?
So, clearly this has been just a short while. I've been out of this system really only 3 or 4 years now. But what has really been surprising to me is I'd always known that the problems were big. But the sheer size of what we are facing as a country in many sectors, I work in, as has been said, in financial services and healthcare, is just far bigger than I had imagined. But I also am starting to feel that while we have spoken a bit about government, we have spoken quite a bit about philanthropy, I think markets actually have a lot that they can offer in these sectors as well. And really, my own sense is that companies that think about this work not as separate, very much inspired by the example of a company like Jain Irrigation, who say, this is our business and this is how we transform the world. I feel could have a really big impact on the size of problems that we see. Thank you.
Thank you, Nachiket. Thank you, Mr. Pai. We're now going to take another little pause for our second fireside chat. Our topic, leading systemic change. This session is focused on the challenges that philanthropists face when they work with multiple stakeholders, especially the government, in bringing about change. Moderating this session is Ajit Rangnekar, Dean of the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. His career has spanned over 30 years in consulting and industry across different countries in Asia. He has played a key role in leading ISB and turning it to one of Asia's leading business schools. With him on the panel are 3 people you've seen up on the stage before. So can we have Mr. Rangnekar up first, please?
Thank you.
And Nachiket, could we have you back as well? Ashish Dhawan, could we have you as well with us, please? And Mr. Ramji Raghavan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, thank you, Peter. Good evening, everybody. Before we look at the transformation and other things, I'm just curious about one thing. All 3 of you come from the financial services sector, as have many others. Not a sector exactly known for doing great and good things. So what is it that most motivated each one of you to be where you are? You want to start, Nachiket?
Oh, I see. Well, I think for me, it's a little bit easier. First of all, we had leaders like Mr. Vagul, like Mr. Kamath, who thought in very large sweeping terms. They were not people that were content with, the immediate next opportunity. And clearly ICICI was a development bank. Our mandate was we should, do good in a certain sector. And many initiatives that we took, for example, creating NCDEX, of course it made lots of money later on, but at that point the idea was this is necessary to do, it's important to do, we should do it. If we don't do it, who else will do it? So I would say, city bankers may have a harder time answering that question, but certainly from an ICICI perspective, it was not that hard.
Ashish, we've been involved with a lot of things together. I continue to be amazed by your passion and your desire. What made you make the big change?
Ajit, it started at a very young age. When I was in school, I had a brilliant principal who, when I was in class 11 and 12, had a few of us go and teach middle school. And for me, that was the aha moment. I went running back home and told my mom that I wanted to be a teacher. She swatted that idea in a half a second, but the bug was always in me. And so I was always very passionate about education. Even when I had a corporate job in the States, I would teach a little bit on the side. As I came back, I knew very clearly that I would have a corporate career for maybe 10 or 15 years, and then I'd move on to doing something else. And so I started to engage with a few organizations, really to learn, so that when I embarked on my next career, I'd be somewhat better prepared. So it's been in me for a very long time.
And you, Ramji?
When I was in school in Rishi Valley, I read a book about Shangri-La, right, that Lost Horizon. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to live in Shangri-La? Now, I had a very successful father, very able executive, so I wanted to be like him. So I went and did an MBA at London Business School, came back in my early 20s and thought I'd go and work in a village. By that time, I'd read another book on the life of Che Guevara, right? Not recommended by LBS. But anyway, so this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't have the courage at that time in the late 70s. Doing this kind of work was a lot more difficult than probably it is today. So I ended up working for Citibank, and all the years went by. And, it's like anybody else. You ask yourself the meaning of life. Are you happy? And I realized this wasn't natural to me. I wasn't sure what was natural to me, but this wasn't it. I think Mr. Pai talked about getting some kind of inner peace. And I remember a friend of mine telling me in London, you told me a story when J. Krishnamurti was walking towards a village one day. He saw an old woman carrying a headload of firewood, and he insisted on carrying it for her. And I said, yes, my mother read this out when I was a kid. And he said, you told me this story about 30 years ago, and do you know why he did it? And I said, I think I do, but you'll say I'm speaking from here and not from here. So tell me, why did he do it? And he said, because, old boy, he felt her pain. The problem with you is that you don't feel the other person's pain. And he was dead right. I didn't sleep very well that night. But anyway, that's the short story.
So it's interesting, all three of you are MBAs. I deal a lot with MBAs myself. All three of you started what is traditionally called highly successful, the desired career. And yet at some stage, all three of you chose to go where your heart is. Is it? So do you, and we've had some discussion today about, whether the young are more passionate, less passionate, whether they are, what's your feel? I mean, you deal with a number of young MBAs who work with you, you do with Teach for India, and I'm sure you have had a lot with IF. What's your feel of the young today? I mean, where do you think they're coming from?
It's very difficult to generalize because you can't look at your youth and transplant it on the youth of today. And, having those sorts of empathy skills to figure out exactly, I don't know how my 18-year-old daughter thinks, right? Because it's so difficult to put yourself in somebody else's mind. But my sense, now I don't want to offend anyone, is there is this caught in the headlights kind of phenomenon we're going through. And it comes from heavy westernization. Okay? So everybody wants to literally go out. And there's very little focus on, and hey, I'm guilty of it myself, so it's not being holier than that. And there's very little sense of understanding of you can't survive unless your community survives. You are the world, and you have to create it. The Americans can't come and make India rich. Indians have to make India rich. I'm not sure if the young see that.
I clearly think that there has been a sea change in terms of the way the young have a much greater social consciousness than we ever did. At least the things that I have been involved with, I find that a great number of young people apply to work in the social sector. I do agree that they sometimes don't necessarily have, or sometimes they're backbenchers and they're doing too much intellectualizing. But by and large, the commitment is unbelievable. The sacrifices they're willing to make, and maybe because our economy is at a different place, maybe because they're very self-confident and they're sure that they're going to always have a job, 5, 10 years down the road. But I think I found that they're much more committed than I ever was or my friends were in our generation.
You've seen that certainly for Teach for India, there's been a huge increase in the number of people applying to be fellows, isn't it? I don't know what
it shocks me. I remember when Shaheen first spoke to me 4 years ago, and, biggest concern was who the hell is going to apply? And it's shocking because this past year, 7,800 young people applied for 300 slots. Yeah. The fact that they were willing to give up careers and basically go work, to teach for 2 years in an underprivileged community, making a salary of 16,000 rupees with a small housing stipend on top of that, is enormous sacrifice, which bright Indians from the best colleges would never have made, at least in my time.
I actually think it's really a smart investment, because I've seen the transformation in those young people over the 2 years, and the change in them and the greater sensitivity and understanding that they bring later makes them much, much better citizens. So hats off to those young kids for really getting that out. Let's just move on. I mean, all three of you have done what I'd call fairly transformational kind of work. You are doing a lot in, as somebody said, breaking the model in healthcare, and both of you are doing it in education. To some extent, these are services that we normally expect the government to deliver. So, in a way, you are really stepping in where the government has failed, right? What do you find the government's reaction to that? Is there been a resentment? Has there been a resistance? Have they worked with you? And what have you done to go that extra mile to make them partners, or have you?
So speaking of myself, I'm certainly not of the view that the government cannot deliver or cannot do this. Even in education, when I was in ICSF Foundation, we actually worked with McKinsey to ask the question around the world, who actually delivers elementary education? I think other than the country of Georgia, which has an exclusively private sector elementary education, everybody else is doing this with the government. And I feel personally that as citizens, as people who participate, as innovators, government is not like a monolith. It's not somebody else. Is there a way we can engage with it to make sure that it performs? And in healthcare, I think the challenge is even bigger in some ways, because in other fields you could say people demand it, and therefore government has to deliver. Today, chronic disease is a huge burden that we are seeing. If you look at in terms of DALYs or disability-adjusted life years, mental illness is the #1 issue that we are facing today. Self-inflicted injury, which is a euphemism for suicide, is exceeding infectious disease as the #1 cause of premature mortality. Right? Mental issues. Clearly, these are areas in which we cannot wait for the people to start demanding it. They will take a long time to figure out. Some of my patients are telling me, you have high blood pressure. He says, well, that's good. I got more blood. He doesn't have a sense that this is something to worry about. Whether government delivers it or private sector delivers it, my sense is, as innovators, our role is to find a way to make it happen, to find the triggers, to find the catalysts. It's not obvious to me that we should give up on government or that our work should be seen as in opposition to the government. If you talk to the government at the highest levels, they are struggling with the same question. It's not as if people are sitting in Delhi or in Patna, for that matter, and cooking up schemes that deliberately will not work. They have the intent to make it happen, particularly now when the electoral uncertainties are so high. What they need from us is how to do it.
And you mentioned that the scale is much bigger than what you even feared, and I think both of you must also have that. So where does your background, your education help you to perhaps look at this very differently from the government?
No, I mean, there is no, I cannot find a specific linkage. Clearly, this whole approach, first of all, having grown up in ICICI, that's really the only place I worked. I've lost the fear of scale, built an organization that went from...
That's a tribute to you, Mr. Vagul.
Mr. Vagul, clearly, leaders like him gave us a sense that you dream, you can make it happen, right? So there's not a sense in my mind that it can't be done or that this is a hopeless cause. The reality is 900 million people are sitting below $2 a day in the country. We are one of the poorest countries in the world. But beyond that, I feel careful thought, careful analysis, constantly meeting people, constantly working with people, trying to figure out, because the ideas are there, is my sense. In fact, somebody like me, I worry when I see a new idea, because I feel there are lots of things that are already going on. And, to quote what Mr. Vagul was saying, the opportunity is to bring it together, to make it happen. It's not as if we are the only country struggling with health systems. I just came back from Thailand. When they were as poor as we are, they actually built something, and that works.
And that works. They have a great healthcare system.
What I think the opportunity for us is to, go back to the drawing board each time, come up with the ideas, and to see how can we make it happen.
Ashish, education, especially primary education for the underprivileged, depending on whom you look at, we come in the bottom 2, bottom 3 in the world. You think we can still make it happen, isn't it?
Yeah, I do believe so. And I actually think that, we came second last in the world. But I do think we will hit a brick wall as a country in the next 15 years if several thousands, hundreds of thousands of us don't work on this problem, because most countries in the world have gone from low income to middle income using a factor input strategy, which is precisely what India is doing. But very few, the only way countries go from middle income to high income is by having the base of the pyramid being extremely well educated. No country in the world is developed without having really good human capital at the lowest levels. And so I think this imperative for our generation to solve this problem. I think in urban, you talked about government. I'm new to this, so I really haven't worked a lot with government. But clearly, I think in urban India, we've already seen a massive migration away from the government sector in education. 50% of our children in urban India already go to private school. Most government school teachers in urban India send their children to private school. Having said that, I think the real tragedy is that poor parents have a horrible choice. They have private schools that are just terrible, and they take away a high share of their savings and their income, and we've got a government system where there's no accountability at all. So I do believe for scale, one has to work with government, but India is a unique situation where this massive migration has already happened to a great extent, particularly in urban India.
Ramji, what's your experience been in there?
The experience has been very positive. You see, firstly, we have to work with government, the kind of work we do. And I have to say, when I quit my job, came back, a lot of my friends abroad used to say, "You're crazy. You can't get anything done." Now, maybe it's sheer luck, but the people who came together in Agastya, whether it was the former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, DRDO officials, Chandrababu Naidu, who helped us, Today, the Chief Secretary of Karnataka visited our campus 2 years ago in Kuppam and said, we need this in Karnataka. Come up with a proposal to create a hands-on science education ecosystem. Dr. Kalam came 3 weeks ago to our campus. He's organized for me to meet with him, Mr. Nitish Kumar, to take the model to Bihar. So all I'm seeing at various levels in the government, on the whole, is a very supportive group. Now, partly, why is that happening? Very often we tell the government, look, this is a good idea, but we don't need to do it. We haven't got the bandwidth. You do it. And they turn around to you and say, no, we can't execute. You better do it, right? So there's that thing as well. So collaborating with the government is very important. And they've been, on the whole, very supportive of the work we're doing. Ups and downs, yeah, I imagine you have the same thing in the private sector. The next point is, it's not that government should do something. Government's so big. There's a gap between government and businesses. There's an innovation gap very often. There are things a business would not touch or the government would not focus on. And that's where the innovators come in and create new models, which the government can absorb or a business can absorb, and then you create another model. So there's a role for everyone.
And this is what you and I, Ashish, also discussed a short while ago. So take, for example, mobile technology as a possible means of bridging part of the last mile problem, of reducing the cost of transaction and so on, which entrepreneurs can do. But a lot of that for you to do requires an enormous amount of investment. So when you look at this entire, yes, markets do play a part, but there are very significant parts of this whole system where market does not work and philanthropy or government intervention is needed. Right? Do you see big chunks of those? Are there spaces where we are not getting enough investment either as from philanthropy or from government, but if we do get, would completely transform this scene?
Yeah. I mean, in 2008, I made a presentation to the Knowledge Commission on how we could take this model across India. And I said, in about 20 years, you would have sparked curiosity and creativity through hands-on learning in a way that no society has done in history. Let's do it. And they asked me how much money would it take. I said it's about $2 or $3 billion over 10, 15 years, which is nothing in terms of the investment budget. It hasn't happened. I mean, it's happening in Karnataka. It may happen in Bihar and maybe a couple of states. But there are very good ideas, scalable ideas, where, clearly what we lack is money. I'll be honest about it. And if we had 100 crores more, we could do that many more things.
Ashish, anything on you? I know that you've been putting a lot of your effort on those spots where there isn't a market solution. But do you think others can? I mean, here are so many philanthropists sitting here. Are there any big spaces that we could have really impact philanthropy happening?
Yeah, so I think in education there are many areas, and particularly the bottom half of the socioeconomic pyramid markets don't work. If I look at the affordable private school sector in India, the learning outcomes are actually not very different versus the public system, because the truth is, at least every school that I've gone to see where the price point is 300-400 rupees, which is what's affordable for a poor parent, unfortunately it's near impossible to deliver high quality at that price point. So the market just doesn't work. You need, and you won't be compliant, frankly, with the RTE. If you look at human capital development, again, a very difficult space for markets to work, at least today, because there's no extra reward for the training that you get. Good training is not necessarily incentivized. Progression from teacher to head teacher, there's no meritocracy. So there are several spaces within education where I think the markets don't work very well.
So that's one big area for many of you to concentrate on. Thank you very much for being a part of this panel. You're doing great work. Keep on with all the great things you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, could you stay on stage, please? Gentlemen, can we request you to stay on stage, please, while we just quickly get to the audience and ask a few questions?
Yeah. The first question is for Shrikant Nadamuni. Shrikant, hi. Hi. So the panel was talking about the role of government. We heard people talking about innovative models. You were in Silicon Valley for a long time. Now you work for the government. You head the technology at UID. Is there an opportunity for India to build new innovative models using technology which could help us leapfrog and find a better way to deliver public services?
Certainly. I believe that we certainly can't run our governments with leather-bound books and pen, and I've seen that in many cities where we have deployed municipal governance systems. We certainly need to move towards use of technology and process reengineering to make governments more efficient. India has had many successes with respect to e-governance projects and the use of technology. For instance, the railway reservation system is a huge success that we can all be proud of. We all use that. The banking system, which pretty much computerized with core banking systems and so on that came in the last 20, 30 years, I think is a huge success, which has gotten benefits to the common person, the common man. So there are lots of successes, and I think many of them, including the mobile revolution, all have their inception in technology. So I certainly see technology as a driver of improved governance and better service delivery in the country. Having said that, we have to realize that e-governance projects fail very often. They fail more often than IT projects in the private sector, and that's for many reasons. The government is not well equipped with expertise in that sector, so it's a poor judge of good systems. There are implementation issues, there are training issues, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, at least our own experience with e-governance foundation earlier in putting ERP systems, municipal ERP systems in city governance, as well as in the UID project, our initial trials in Jharkhand on NREGA bank payments, the LPG gas cylinder automation in Mysore, where now it's moving towards a cash-based, direct cash transfer. And for instance, the PDS experiments we have done in Andhra and so on, they're very, very encouraging. It looks like, corruption can come down significantly, efficiencies can go up. So I'm pretty bullish about, these systems bringing about better governance.
Thank you so much, Shrikant. Peter?
Thank you, Meetu. I have a question here for Professor Sriram, Professor M.S. Sriram. Professor, there's this view that philanthropic capital can only do so much. But if companies in general pursued shared value, what Michael Porter describes as, let me get this right, creating economic value in a way that also creates value for society, if this happens, that the impact will be much greater. The question is, are marketers willing to reward shared value thinking? Or is there some kind of fear that applying this layer could dilute competitiveness?
Good evening. I don't think I need to answer this. Mr. Jain has already answered this a while ago. And Nachiket is sitting there, and I don't see him as a crossover leader at all. He was crossing over even when he was within ICICI Bank. I've tracked his work on microfinance. And both of them have been creating value from within. And I don't think it in any way affected how the market perceived these two businesses. Stretching the point a little bit further with Nachiket, having crossed over, he's only looking for market-based solutions. So in a sense, he's crossing over from the philanthropic model back to the market. So that's convergence for you. And I think that's where we are. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor. Meetu?
Thank you, Peter. My next question is for Lord Lumba. Lord Lumba, good evening. You've managed to bring a lot of international attention to your cause, which is supporting widows around the world. How do you build international support and inspire other people to join your bandwagon?
Thank you. Well, my simple answer is that it has to be a good cause. If it's a good cause, people will join you in your endeavors. I focused on widow's plight purely because I grew up as a widow's son. I was only 10 years old when my father died, and I saw my mother's life change dramatically. My father's body was still lying in the house, not cremated yet, and my grandmother ordered my mother to remove her jewelry, bindi, and wear white clothes. I was only 10 years old and I couldn't believe it, I couldn't apprehend what was happening. But the real change which I saw and which inspired me to follow this work was when I got married. The Panditji who was conducting my marriage ceremony, he asked my mother to move away from the Vedya. Now I could not understand that, and I could not even accept it. A mother who gave me birth, a mother who educated me, a mother who always wished me well, how could she bring me bad luck? So that thing really haunted me all the time. And my mother was very selfless lady. She was lucky or fortunate in the sense that my father was a successful businessman and he left her with a lot of resources. Even though she had never gone to school herself, she ensured that all her 7 young children are educated. In fact, she educated me in America. But when I started my work in England, I had to start from scratch. I worked in a factory where I cleaned the floors. I sold ice cream from an ice cream van. Then I started my clothing business from a market stall, and it grew. And today we are very respectful business people in London. Now, when my mother passed away, I realized that if it wasn't for the education, I probably wouldn't have progressed the way I progressed. So I wanted to honor my mother, and like most of people here who build hospitals or schools, ashrams, I thought that if my mother did not have the money, she would not have been able to educate me. So I started thinking that how do I honor my mother? I set up a charity in her name, but with a focus on educating children of poor widows in India. However, to answer the question that how do you convince other people to follow you, as I said before, it is the cause. I took my cause to the United Nations because I conducted a research study and we discovered that there are 245 million widows in the world. 42 million of them are in India. There are 500 million children of widows around the world. Out of them, 100 million children are in India. They suffer in silence through no fault of their own. It's just because they have lost their father or mother has lost her husband. So I try to, because it's a colossal problem, almost 700 million people suffer, and which nobody realizes. Nobody ever identified this problem, and nobody ever addressed this problem. In fact, in 2005, I spoke at the United Nations. We were the first NGO ever to celebrate Diwali at the UN, at the headquarters, and Kofi Annan mentioned to me that they should have considered widows in the Millennium Development Goals, which they did not. But as the problem was, proved through this research study, people wanted to help widows. And I don't have to tell you, here in India, what happens to widows. They're ostracized, they're considered evil people, they're inauspicious, and their children suffer the most because the mother gets thrown out of the house or the system, and she has to depend on her children, who end up either on streets or in factories. So I took all this information to the United Nations, and I launched International Widows Day as a focused global day for helping widows. And very pleased to say to you, within 5 years of my campaign, the United Nations recognized 23rd of June as International Widows Day, which happens to be the day on which my mother became widow in 1954. So as I said, it's a cause which brings people together. And I often say, Zindagi mein main chala tha akela, log milte gaye aur kafla banta gaya. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Lumba. Peter?
Last question to our audience members. Sir, a question for you. You have worked, Mr. Ghosh, for huge global corporations like Citibank. Now, as a social entrepreneur yourself, how has all that vast business experience helped you define yourself and define what you're doing and do what you're doing?
Well, just as a continuation of what Professor Sriram said, Citibank was a great place for learning entrepreneurial skills. And a lot of us, whether in the social sector or education, like Ramji or Ramesh Ramanathan, have taken it to the social sector, others have taken it to the financial sector, others to the business. So I think we brought that entrepreneurial flair to that, and it is necessary for the social sector also. Finally, I'd like to say that having worked for Citibank, handling crises was hardwired to us. So when the crisis hit the microfinance sector in 2010, it was no sweat. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Meetu?
Thank you, Peter. I'd like to thank the panel, Professor Ranganekar, Nachiket, Ashish, and Mr. Ramji Raghavan. Thank you so much. Thank you, and we move to the next segment. Our next award is the Cause Marketing Award. This award is for a company that has successfully marketed products or services in conjunction with a charity and brought significant benefits to both parties. And the nominees are PNG CSR program Shiksha provides access to education for the underprivileged kids. The HDFC Debt Fund for Cancer Cure provides financial aid to cancer patients. Over 6 crore rupees have been approved for more than 200 patients. HUL created a Facebook campaign for Surf Excel. Whenever anyone liked the page, Surf Excel would make a donation to chosen charities. An interesting partnership where Whirlpool washed and cleaned old clothes collected by Gunj, which were then distributed among the underprivileged. Finally, Tata Tea, which launched the Jagore campaign in an effort to wake up the nation to the issues that concern it. May we invite Indrajit Gupta to announce the winner?
The winner of the cause marketing category goes to Tata Tea's Jagore campaign.
The Jagore campaign woke up an apathetic nation to the need to get involved in the issues that concern it.
May we request Tata Global Beverages Regional President for South Asia, Sanjeev Sareen, to accept the Cause Marketing Award on behalf of Tata Tea. Congratulations, Mr. Sareen. A question for you. Online activism is seen as a bit of a mixed blessing. It's great for spreading awareness, but not so great for action. But Jagore has used the internet as well as the traditional media. What would you advise other causes who use the web as part of their strategy?
What you're saying is kind of true. However, I think as a company, TGB, erstwhile Tata Tea, we have been kind of innovators and treading where people don't tread. We've been defying and defining situations. The messaging which we have tried to attempt in our campaigns has really been, like you mentioned, to inspire and awake people to what is happening around us. Whether it was the first campaign on seeking accountability from public servants, went into corruption before corruption became the rallying call, or even last year when we launched the Soch Badlo campaign. We also realized that people actually want to engage. It's just that they get scared when they get so much of systems overtake them and they don't know which way to go, which actually then launched us into this digital social media, where we actually enabled people to go and register themselves. And that demanded a very simple front end, and it demanded a very strong back end to enable them to do what they were supposed to be doing. So if I summarize, I think the three key things which are important is, I think somebody did mention the relevance of the cause which you are talking about. Is it emotively linking it to people, or is it a very esoteric kind of a cause which you are trying to espouse? The closer you come to the heart of the people, the more engagement you're going to get out of it. And secondly is, how easy is it to engage with what you want them to do? And lastly, I think, is how do you amplify the whole thing? And that's where the whole thing of marrying mass media, digital, all comes together and takes it to a different high. I think there are three big learnings which we got from this.
Thank you, Mr. Sareen. Thank you, Indrajit. Peter, over to you now.
Our next award, Distinguished Non-Resident Philanthropist. This award is for a non-resident Indian who's contributed significantly to a social cause in India by giving wealth, time, and expertise. The nominees are I beg your pardon. Vinod Khosla and his wife Neeru have pledged half of their fortunes, estimated at $1.4 billion, to charity. Raj Lumba's Lumba Foundation educates the kids of poor widows in India. Thanks to his efforts, as we've heard, the UN declared June 23rd as International Widows' Day. Dr. Kumar Bahulia lost two brothers and a sister to waterborne diseases. His charitable foundation for basic health care in Kerala villages. Dr. Romesh Wadhwani's Wadhwani Foundation has spent around $25 million on a skills development project, 2 major biosciences and biotechnology research centers, and the National Entrepreneurship Network in India. Gururaj Deshpande's Center for Social Entrepreneurship backs nearly 5,000 projects involving students across health, education, and agriculture. May we invite Ms. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw to announce the winner.
I'm sure there are no guesses. It's Lord Raj Lumba.
Raj Lumba took up the cause of widows, one of the most vulnerable sections of our society, and pushed the UN to declare June 23rd International Widows' Day.
Congratulations, Lord Lumba. A brief question for you. You had a very tough childhood, but you managed to overcome all that to reach where you are. When you meet families that your organization is helping, what advice do you give to their young children?
My advice to the young children is that they should not waste my money or effort. They should study well, make progress in their life, and help the other needy people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lord Lumba. Ms. Shaw, would you just stay back to present the next award? Thank you, Lord Lumba. Thank you. We now move on to the final award of the evening, the Good Samaritan Award. I'm sorry. This award is for an exceptional individual at any level in a company. We're not looking necessarily at the CEO. This individual has successfully led and galvanized support within the organization to mount programs that help more people to support worthy causes and give back to the society. The nominees are Satya M. for supporting causes that cater to the education of underprivileged children and empowerment of women. Nilesh Lale initiated a drive that collected over ₹1 lakh for drought-hit villages in Pune. Mudita Shrivastava facilitated the Million Trees Drive in Gurgaon. She also helped raise ₹25 lakh for 5 NGOs. Abraham Moses, who leads groups to engage with kids suffering from cerebral palsy, to orphanages and to homes for the destitute, also led an initiative by Mindtree to adopt a school near Bangalore. Archana Raghuram, who gave up her career as a software professional to set up the corporate volunteering program at Cognizant. May we request Ms. Mazumdar Shaw to announce the winner?
And the award goes to Abraham Moses.
Please welcome Abraham Moses, the Good Samaritan.
Disadvantaged kids and the destitute, influence an organization's social commitment, and has become a role model to hundreds of IT professionals.
Congratulations, Mr. Moses. A very small question. What kind of organizational support did you get in your philanthropic efforts?
My organization supported me with complete empowerment, encouragement, more than 100% faith on me, and that made me to work on the good cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Ms. Moses.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Peter, over to you.
One final item before we get down to dinner. The new Forbes India issue is devoted to philanthropy. May we invite Mr. Vagul, Mr. Shibulal, Mr. Subaya to the stage to release the special edition. With them, can we also have Indrajit Gupta and Gurmeet Singh. This issue is chock-a-block with features on philanthropy. You'll read in more detail about each of our winners, and you'll also see some other stories that will inform, hopefully, all our philanthropic journeys. But here we are with the special edition. This issue has not just one cover but four, because we felt, as it says on the screens, I don't know if you can read it, but let me read it to you. Philanthropy, done right, is too important to restrict to one cover. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
May we invite Deepak Ajwani? May we invite Deepak Ajwani, Forbes India's Director of Online and Events, to deliver the vote of thanks. Deepak?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm deeply honored to stand before this room full of most noble men and women in the business community. We've heard some of the most amazing philanthropic initiatives today, some stories which I'm sure have inspired you all and those who are watching our webcast live today. But this evening would have never been possible without the support and contribution of a few good people, some present right here amidst us, some who have worked quietly behind the scenes. Let me begin by thanking our eminent jury, our jury chair, Mr. Narayanan Wagul, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Madhav Chauhan, for helping us pick the most deserving candidates for the first ever Forbes India Philanthropy Awards. I would like to thank our knowledge partners, Give India. They helped us support to bring out the best nominees for each of our categories and help shape this splendid evening. Thank you, Give India team. I would also like to thank our associate sponsors, the Prestige Group and Life Insurance Corporation of India. Your association with this event is an acknowledgement that there is indeed a need to reward the larger business community's role in giving back to the society. The venue of our event today, this magnificent grand ballroom, is courtesy the Leela Palace. We appreciate your support. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't just another awards for us. The wheel started rolling quite a few months ago. Forbes India team stepped in to make this event happen because it meant a lot to us personally. And it was made extra special by you all members of the audience by taking time off from your busy schedules on a working day and a working week. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the dinner ahead. Thank you.